Shalom and welcome to another episode in our series, Faith Journeys with God in the Land. Today I'm walking along the Sea of Galilee. I'm walking along the western shoreline of the Sea of Galilee. The Hebrew name for it is Kinneret. It actually means harp because the shape of the lake is in the shape of a heart. The lake is 13 miles in length and maybe 6.5 or 7 at its widest point at the northwest side of this freshwater lake. The lake is fed by 3 tributaries on the north. One spring is called the Bonias, another called the Dan, and yet another tributary begins in Lebanon. It's called the Hatzbani. And they form the upper Jordan River, which flows into the Sea of Galilee. And then on the southern end, the water flows out of the lake. It flows almost all the way down to the Dead Sea. It used to, but no longer does it flow that far. So as I'm walking along this beautiful shoreline, we're actually at the southwest corner of the lake. You can look across the way and see what the Gospels in Mark 5 says, the other side. So the western side of the lake was primarily Jewish towns and villages, including places like Capernaum. On the northwest corner, Chorazim. On the north end, Bethsaida, these 3 cities that actually were condemned by Jesus because of their unbelief. But this lake was well used in the days of Jesus by fishermen. Now this lake still has fish in it. The fishermen here locally know the right spots, and the tilapia is one type of fish that's still found here. So I would like to think that we're walking along the shoreline, although this is a nice path today. But how many times did Jesus walk along this pathway, this shoreline, where he encountered a great view like what you see behind me? He called many people to follow him, and many did. In fact, many people were curious to see what and hear what Jesus was teaching about the kingdom. There were Pharisees, religious leaders, certainly zealots, those who were looking for a messianic figure that could rise and do something about this Roman oppression. And then there were others who were deemed with smekah. That's a very important concept. Smekah. It means authority. And that's the type of itinerant rabbi that Jesus was. He was identified as one who taught with authority. He healed with authority. He conducted himself as one who really had a particular gift, if you will, and was set aside for the purpose of teaching Torah. Now there was also something called the yoke of the Torah, and I would like to think that Jesus had his own way of interpreting the law. We read that in Matthew chapter 5, for instance. I've not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. The word really implies to place it on a firmer foundation. That's the concept from a Hebraic point of view. So what a great perspective this is now of the lake. And along the shoreline, it's Jesus who calls his first disciples. We read this in Matthew 4. Peter, Andrew, and then later James and John. And of course, of the 12 initial disciples, one would betray him in Jerusalem. And yet Jesus was all about teaching and training these disciples to carry on the kingdom work. So walking along the shoreline, that reminds me of an important life lesson as it relates to our faith journey with God, is that he requires us to walk in his pathway. In fact, when Jesus says in Matthew 11, take my yoke upon you and learn of me, you will have peace and rest for your souls. Jesus is actually using what is called a remez there. It's a way of teaching. It's sort of drawing from Old Testament references. And Jesus actually is quoting from Jeremiah chapter 6. I think it's verse 16, where the text says, walk in the right way, on the right paths. And when you do, you will find rest for your souls. So as I just walked along the shoreline and have sort of stopped here because the view is really a nice one here on the southwest corner of the lake, I am reminded of what Jesus says there in Matthew 11, quoting from Jeremiah. We are to walk on the right pathways. We can learn the hard way and walk on the wrong pathways, and we think it may bring us fulfillment, but walking the way of God is the only way to live and find peace that's an inner peace that really helps us and inspires us to walk as a disciple, one who pleases God in every way. So here along the shoreline, maybe we can remember that a very important step in our faith journey is to walk in his ways, because that's the only way that we will find rest for our souls. It's so quiet and beautiful here. I could stay here a long time, but yet we continue along the way and teach other faith lessons here in Israel. Let me also just conclude by saying this is a January day. It's sunny. Of course, the warmth of the sun is really wonderful. It's about 70 actually today. But to know that we're walking where Jesus did, along this shoreline, and it makes me curious to think how many people heard Jesus say and teach, like about the kingdom, but also how many people actually responded. It's one thing to hear the words of Jesus and say, oh, that's nice, but it's another thing to put them into practice and to actually walk and exhibit the kingdom principles that, for instance, he would share as recorded in Matthew 5, 6, and 7, just up the way a little on a hillside somewhere. We call that the Sermon on the Mount. So walking in the footsteps of Jesus, literally that's what we're doing today, and walking in the right paths is a part of our faith journey as we grow in our faith step by step. Be encouraged today, my friends, and until next time, shalom.